most luxurious of excursions. Established in an apartment at one of Europe's finest hotels, within 2 days he would be chafing for pastures new. He hardly gave himself the opportunity to write down his impressions of one country or city before he was off on his travels again. However, he had the uncommon talent was tall and sallow and had on old-fashioned side whiskers. He nodded at Hilary without a smile, without speaking. As the express picked up speed beyond Watford, Hilary allowed his eyes to dwell again on the painting. His mind became occupied with an idle daydream in which he was about to enter the hotel in the painting, but was prevented from doing so by a darkly dressed man who held his arm firmly at the elbow. But he knew that he must see inside the place and struggled to free himself. At last he did so, but just as he mounted the steps to the entrance, the sudden application of the brakes woke him with a heart-stopping shock. When he opened his eyes, he saw that the man in the corner seat watching him sardonically. The train stood at Bletchley Station, where it was not scheduled to stop, but had been checked by a signal. Hilary got to his feet, stretched, and looked once again at the painting. He knew at once that something in it had changed since he had last inspected it. The difference was not immediately apparent, but after a minute he recognized it. Two figures stood in front of the steps to the hotel. One had his arm on the other's elbow. The jolt he felt on seeing this was echoed by the train restarting. Through his shock and through the near-escaping steam from the labouring engine, Hilary heard his fellow passenger speak, though at first he was unable to distinguish the words and had to ask him to report them. I said that the painting you are examining so closely is remarkable, is it not? It is unusual for a picture of such quality to enhance a railway compartment. It was not so much the painting quality which intrigued me, replied Hilary, but the subject. I thought I knew this country as well as anybody, but I am utterly perplexed as to where this building is situated. Are you able to put my mind at ease? Indeed I am, sir. As the stranger spoke the words, he reached inside his facile to bring forth an ancient timetable. He shook out the map from its folds. If you look here, you will see that the London North Western operated a steamer service across the Irish Sea to Greenmore, close to Cullingford. They had an interest in the Dundalk, Newry and Greenore Railway, who erected the hotel in the latter years of the last century. This timetable is many years out of date, but railways are a passion of mine, and I find it interesting to compare the working of lines today with that of 20 or so years ago, when the LMS had never even been dreamt of. Hilary was never one to prolong a conversation needlessly, and on this occasion did little to maintain it, answering shortly to the comments and questions of his travelling companion. Lulled by the rhythm of the rail beats, he soon fell asleep. When he awoke, the express was drawing into Birmingham, and the stranger had gone. Left alone, Hilary felt a compulsion to study the painting yet again. To his surprise, the figures he had noticed earlier were no longer to be seen. Neither was the steamboat in the picture. Furthermore, there was a subtle change in the feeling of the painting. It was no longer a pleasing picture to behold, but seemed to have acquired a gloomy, sinister quality. The pine trees swayed by the wind of an approaching squall, which whipped up white horses from a sea that had previously been calm and inviting. No human figures were to be seen in the landscape, which now seemed to speak only of dereliction and decay. most enthusiastic tourists, and only in the last year or so had things settled down so that visitors felt that they could explore the country in safety. However, he felt little desire to sightsee. His intention was to get to Greenhall as quickly as possible and set eyes on the mysterious hotel. The journey came as a shock to his system. The mail boat was crowded, and since he had not made a reservation, no cabins were available, in spite of his efforts to bribe the purser. For once he neglected to put down his ill temper on paper, but instead drank whiskey and water at the rowdy bar, feeling morose, frustrated, and seasick. His arrival in Dublin was hardly more auspicious. It happened that a great agricultural show was being held in the city. All the reputable hotels had been filled, and Hilary was forced to patronize a shabby boarding house full of theatre people close to the station. It was the most squalid night he had spent in his life, the only consolation being the vitriolic comments on Ireland and its people he jotted down in his pocketbook. master had told him an oil lamp and matches had been left in the hall for those needing to explore the darkened rooms of the place. The hall was an imposing feature, meant to overpower the guest with its grandeur, which reflected the benevolence and prosperity of the railway itself. As he crossed the marble floor, his footsteps echoed to the ceiling, so high that it was scarcely visible in the gloom. The sound disturbed many tiny residents of the deserted building, and their panic-stricken scurrying could be heard from all corners. The reception desk, covered by a thick layer of grey dust, was on the far side of the hall. The visitor's book lay open there. Strangely, the page at which it was opened was clear of dust, and almost of words too, except, and his heart sank as he read the inscription. For the entry was of his own name and address, and the date of that very day. Shaken and mystified, he groped his way to the entrance hall to another room. By chance it was the dining room, with several tables and chairs left in their original positions. With relief, Hilary sat down, placing his lamp on the table before him. For some time his mind was occupied, puzzling over the events that had befallen him since he had embarked on the train at Euston. No natural explanation could suffice for the changes which had happened to the picture, or for the way his name had occurred to be in the visitor's book. As his eyes became accustomed to the dimness of the light, Hilary also became aware of an unwelcome feeling that he was not alone in the room. He glanced around. Mirrors reflected the room from the far wall, though they were so begrimed that the dark outlines of the furniture were blurred. One feature, however, was distinct: the silhouette of a figure in front of the reflected daylight of the only unshuttered window. Yet how could that be? For if the reflection was real, then the person would be sitting opposite him at his table. Yet assuredly no one was there. But that is where the voice came from, and there was a moment before he recognized it. Then he placed it. It was the voice of the man on the train, the man in the corner seat. There will be lean years for you, my friend, if you carry on. There will be no further pleasures in this existence. The image in the mirror was lucid now. Hilary saw again the sardonic features of his travelling companion of the day before, who continued, "You can draw your conclusions about who I may be. My talents are many, but I take particular delight in devising amusing retributions for those who have wrought suffering on others. I cannot claim to be of this earth, or of the other unworldly places, yet I have the power to inflict the direst discomforts on those who I choose to attend. You may be interested to hear that what lies ahead in your life, should you choose to survive your visit to this place. When or if you return to your office, you will find a new face at your desk. The proprietor of your journal has a niece, a bright young thing, who has always had a wish to travel. Unfortunately, she is not able to express herself on page adequately, and so you will become her amanuensis, her ghost. I believe the expression is, if you will pardon the term. Your salary will be severely reduced, of course, and you will lose all the luxuries and privileges you have enjoyed hitherto. against the viciousness and cruelty you have extended to others by the acid of your pen. Many have been thrown onto the streets because of your comments in the past. Now it is your turn. With a movement of fine elegance, the stranger's reflection nodded to itself, and silence descended on the dusty room. After a long pause, Hilary's shaking voice uttered his question. And sir, what course can I take to avoid this fate? Am I allowed to turn a new leaf? I can see my fault, sir, my arrogance, hurtfulness, and I can truly promise that I will not fail in becoming good. Another pause followed, as though those remarks were being considered, and then came the reply. I am afraid not, but I will allow you an alternative. Indeed, as I am not without compassion, and as this location is so eminently suitable, I think I will ordain it a compulsion. Come with me, Mr. Gore. As these words were uttered, the figure of the stranger stepped from the mirror and headed for the door of the dining room. There seemed to be no necessity now for the lamp, and Hilary left it at the table as he followed his strange companion, who noiselessly glided through the hall and began to ascend the stairs. The way led to the very top of the building, through dusty corridors, up crumbling back stairways. At last they arrived at a low, narrow doorway in one of the attic rooms. Your path lies through there. Make haste, or time will run out for you. With these words said, the stranger simply disappeared and melted into his surroundings. After a moment of amazement at this, Hilary obediently opened the door, climbed over a step, and out onto the rain-slashed roof. The wind tugged at his clothes, the rain lashing his face. He moved to the low parapet. His mind was saying, "It looks good on the grass there. Look, you could jump to the beach from here. Fly like a seagull. Just step off the parapet." As he leapt, Hilary expected to wake from a falling nightmare, but he never did. His spread-eagled body was found by the station master an hour or so later, and there was a great deal of speculation at the misdeeds a man like that must have perpetrated to give his soul to everlasting torment in such a way. Meanwhile, back at the offices of the Graphic in Fleet Street, a smiling